अस्सलाम वालेकुम दोस्तों, क्या हाल है आपके? एक बार फिर आपके साथ हाज़िर हूँ। आज है 23 फरवरी, जुमे का रोज़। कई हफ़्ते गुज़र चुके हैं और फाइनली चीज़ें शेप अप हो रही हैं पाकिस्तान में। फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल, मरियम नवाज़ शरीफ इज़ नाउ द चीफ मिनिस्टर ऑफ पाकिस्तान's लार्जेस्ट प्रोविंस, पंजाब, एंड शी टूक ओथ आउटसाइड। देयर वाज़ अ हेवी कॉर्डन, पुलिस की नफ़री खड़ी थी बाहर और उन्होंने पीटीआई के जो अ, कैंडिडेट्स थे जो जीते, उनको अंदर आने नहीं दिया। तो इस माहौल में एक सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम्स तो एटलीस्ट सेटल हुआ है थोड़ा बहुत। अगर आप देखें इस पॉलिटिकल केओस के अंदर सेटल हुआ है, अनसेटल हुआ है। हम इन सब चीज़ों में बात करेंगे एंड ऑफ कोर्स आई एम जॉइन्ड बाय हुसैन नदीम हू वाज़ काइंड इनफ टू इस पूरे जो अपना ये सिचुएशन डेवलप हो रही है, इसको एक डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव से हमें दिखाने के लिए। तो पहले तो हुसैन आप हमें थोड़ा अपने बारे में बताएँ और आप क्या काम कर रहे हैं?
अली, प्लेज़र टू बी हियर। थैंक यू सो मच फॉर इनवाइटिंग मी। और कैलिफ़ोर्निया में इस वक़्त बिल्कुल सुबह है, तो आई जस्ट वोक अप। एंड एज़ फार एज़ माय वर्क इज़ कंसर्न्ड, तो मैं तो एक्चुअली पॉलिसी वर्ल्ड से एंड ये पॉलिटिकल सर्कल से रिटायरमेंट ले ली हुई थी 2 साल पहले। व्हेन द एंटायर सिचुएशन फ्लिप्ड इन द कंट्री, आई डिसाइडेड दैट आई वांटेड टू डू समथिंग मच मोर वर्थव्हाइल, जो हर साल 2 साल बाद चेंज ऑफ बॉसेस या चेंज ऑफ सेटअप की वज़ह से खत्म ना हो रही हो चीज़ें। सो आई मूव्ड डीपर इनटू द टेक्नोलॉजी, खास तौर पर एआई के अंदर काम करना शुरू कर दिया। and figuring out what can we develop on artificial intelligence that can serve public and democratic good. So मैं चुपचाप सैन फ्रांसिस्को में वो कर रहा था, but then things went bad in Pakistan, and then I decided that I think it's a good time to figure out how do we leverage technology and new ideas that can improve the situation in Pakistan and help basically the fundamental block of democracy, which is the human. उसको आप कैसे हेल्प कर सकते हो? I have about 12-13 years of experience working in the policy sector, खास तौर पर national security side and foreign policy. I did my undergrad over here in the US. Then I was doing grad school in UK. I was at Cambridge, and then I finished my PhD at Sydney. And again, much of my work was very heavy on quantitative data, and I looked at how the US foreign policy, specifically the US foreign aid, impacts the civil military relations in Pakistan. So काफ़ी ज़्यादा काम उसी पे किया। Then I published a book on that as well, रूटलेज की तरफ से आई 2022 में। And I've worked primarily in the policy sector. My last role was as the executive director of the Islamabad Policy Research Institute at the Prime Minister's Office National Security Division in Pakistan. उससे पहले भी I worked mostly in the national security side of things. A lot of work that I cannot talk about, but focusing on the foreign policy related issues. और मैंने पाकिस्तान में इलेक्शन कैंपेस पे भी काम किया हुआ है। I've been associated with Pakistan Muslim League Noon. When I moved back from Cambridge 2011 में, I worked with PMLN, and then I worked with Hussain Nadim as his special assistant at the Ministry of Planning and Development. And so I have a very good understanding from both the civilian ministry side, the political party side, and also the military side and the security side of things. I've worked across all these different domains for the last 12 years.
अच्छा, एक आम आदमी को अपने आम अल्फाज में अगर आपने समझाना हो प्रिडिक्टिव एनालिसिस
Yeah.
या पेशन गोई की साइंस या पेशन गोई करना, तो आप किस तरीके से समझाएँगे?
सो आई हैव थोड़ा सा ना मेरा व्यू डिफरेंट है इस बारे में। एंड वो इस वजह से डिफरेंट है बिकॉज आई डोंट गेट माई सेल्फ बॉग डाउन विद नेम्स एंड इंडिविजुअल्स। अगर आप हिस्टोरिक हिस्ट्री देखें ना, मेटा हिस्ट्री देख लें, ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री फॉर लास्ट 6000 ईयर्स, आप एक चीज नोटिस करेंगे, देयर आर रिपीटेड पैटर्न्स इन हिस्ट्री। सेम स्क्रिप्ट ओवर एंड ओवर अगेन वो चलती जा रही है आपकी, फ्रॉम निमरूद इब्राहिम टू फिरौन मूसा, ऑल द वे डाउन टू वेयर वी आर टुडे। सो उसमें जो सिंबल्स है ना आपके, देयर इज एन ओप्रेसर एंड देयर इज अ रेजिस्टेंस, देयर इज दैट स्टोरी जो आपकी एक रिपीट पे चलती आ रही है। और अगर आप, इफ यू बिलीव इन इस्लाम और एनी अदर रिलीजन अब्राहमिक, आप उसमें भी नोटिस करेंगे कि बिब्लिकल फेथ के अंदर भी, अब्राहमिक फेथ में भी एक ही स्क्रिप्ट को बार बार दोहराया गया। Reason I'm talking about this is very important because a lot of my work revolves around the narratives, breaking down the narratives through data and figuring them out how the situation will evolve. So पाकिस्तान के केस में या किसी भी केस में एक्चुअली पेशेंट गोई करना इतना मुश्किल नहीं है, बिकॉज एज ह्यूमंस, एज स्टेट, एज सोसाइटी, हमारे बड़े लिमिटेड बिहेवियर्स हैं। वी आर नॉट अ वेरी अनप्रेडिक्टेबल स्पीशी। हम एक ही तरीके से रिएक्ट करते हैं, या लेफ्ट जाते हैं या राइट जाते हैं इन क्राइसिस सिचुएशंस। आप वो किधर डायरेक्शन लेते हैं टफ सिचुएशंस में, उसका भी पाथवे आगे जो है वो बड़ा क्लियरली डिफाइंड है दैट इफ यू गो ऑन दिस पाथ इन टफ सिचुएशंस द नेट रिजल्ट विल बी दिस। आई एम टॉकिंग स्ट्रिक्टली ऑन द डेटा राइट नाउ। अगर आप डेटा की बिहेवियर मैपिंग करें तो व्हाट पाथ्स विल लीड टू व्हाट आउटकम्स, वो हमारी हिस्ट्री अब इतनी ज्यादा हो चुकी है, एंड प्लानिटरी लेवल के ऊपर हमने इतनी डेटा कर ली हुई है कि हमें बहुत अच्छे तरीके से पता है आउटकम्स क्या हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई गिव यू वन एग्जाम्पल, अगर आप हर रोज एक हैमबर्गर खा रहे हैं, it's very easy to predict with a lot of confidence what your cholesterol levels or what your body BMI will look like in the 2 months, right? आज से 100 साल पहले ये चीज impossible थी because you did not have the ability to break down food into its constituent carbohydrates, fat and all of that. जब आपने वो कर लिया तो आपको उसकी और बॉडी का आपस में लिंक समझ आ गया over 100 year of research. Now you can do the outcomes. The same thing is with, by the way, the environment. You can make the outcomes कि अगर आप इतनी कार्बन मोनोऑक्साइड या आपकी इतने CO2 emissions हैं, तो what will the health of your lungs would look like? So the correlationing जो है वो आप कर सकते हैं. Now I'll put this into the political context because that is where I play with data. मेरा काम ही है to essentially figure out how different situations, when you put it into context of data, what will be the result of those specific outcomes. So in that sense, agar Pakistan ki hum data le, so people think that it's a unique situation. It's not. We all know where it is heading. We all know actually where it has headed. We don't even have to predict what is to come. We can only
कि ये
see.
40 ईयर साइकिल में चल रहा है, 80 ईयर साइकिल में चल रहा है, द लूप।
So मैं इसको अभी वो लूप नहीं करूंगा because Pakistan is still a very young country. I mean, if you think of it, US.
80 years ago there was no Pakistan.
There's no Pakistan. There was maybe a concept of Pakistan 100 years back, right? कॉन्सेप्ट भी नहीं एग्जिस्ट करता था. सो एक तो जो चीजें हैं मैं उसकी बेसिस बता देता हूँ कि हम किस तरह से डेटा करते हैं, व्हाई दिस बिकम्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. और वो ये है कि आपके देखिए दो फंडामेंटल ब्लॉक्स हैं ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री में दैट आर द ड्राइविंग फोर्स टू एनी चेंज. आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट एनी चेंज राइट नाउ, फॉरगेट अबाउट पाकिस्तान, फॉरगेट अबाउट एनीथिंग. Two fundamental blocks in history that change stuff. One is your demograph, key demograph, कि आपकी औरतें ज़्यादा हो रही हैं, मर्द ज़्यादा हो रहे हैं, and by that I mean specifically जिन. I'll give you an example of this. Sorry, I have to keep giving examples. मगर much
It's
of
all
the
about the
women,
examples, buddy.
so much of the woman empowerment and the woman emancipation didn't come out of some ideas जो कि एकदम से डिवाइन आइडियाज आ गए थे. इट वाज अ नेसेसिटी क्रिएटेड बाय द वॉर्स. मर्द हजरात आपके वॉर्स पे चले गए, आपके यूरोप, द टाइम व्हेन यूरोप वाज फाइटिंग. आपकी इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन चल रही है, मर्द हजरात चले गए वॉर के ऊपर, पीछे औरतें जो है रहेगी काम करने के लिए. दे वर पुट इनटू फार्म्स, दे वर पुट इनटू इंडस्ट्री, राइट? And from there the woman emancipation grew because कई तो जगह पे रशिया में for instance 1/3 of the men population died during the wars. So the whole architecture of the society completely shifted. Now what I'm saying right now, अगर आप पाकिस्तान के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखें, आपका मेजर डेमोग्राफ completely चेंज हो चुका हुआ है. 65% of the country is under the age of 30 now. और वो भी जो जनरेशन है वो आपके अपने आबाओ अजदाद या फोर फादर्स से इंफॉर्मेशन, एजुकेशन, लर्निंग नहीं ले रही. उनकी लर्निंग डेवलप हुई हुई है नेटफ्लिक्स से, उनकी लर्निंग डेवलप हो रही है यूट्यूब से. आप गरीब से गरीब भी हो पाकिस्तान में, और अगर आप यंग हो, आपका एक्सेस टू यूट्यूब है. नाउ यू लिसनिंग टू व्हाट, आप गौरव आर्या को भी सुन रहे हो इंडिया में, वो आपको बता रहे कि जी आपके जो फौजी हजरात हैं वो ये कर गए. नाउ यू हैव दैट पर्सपेक्टिव एज वेल. आप सुन रहे हो कंटेंट, ईरान से भी सुन रहे हो, आप अफगानिस्तान से भी सुन रहे हो. आपकी जो वो एक स्टेट की मोनोपोली थी ना ऑन इंडिविजुअल्स, जो वेस्टफेलियन स्टेट आपकी देती है, व्हिच इज द मोनोपोली ऑन नैरेटिव्स, मोनोपोली ऑन रिसोर्सेज, मोनोपोली ऑन वायलेंस. मोनोपोली ऑन नैरेटिव्स तो आपकी खत्म होगी स्टेट की, बिकॉज अब पीटीवी जो है वो आपको डिक्टेट नहीं कर रहा नेशनल स्टोरी. नेशनल स्टोरी आपकी डिक्टेट हो रही है कि एचबीओ पे आपका होमलैंड सीरीज है वो क्या बात कर रही है, आपके लोग सुन रहे हैं, आपके लोग हर कंटेंट सुन रहे हैं. सो यू एज अ स्टेट are now living at a time when you're competing to get the attention and love of your people at a time when there are all the voices that they are available to. उस सिचुएशन में जो डेमोग्राफ्स हैं आपके वो इतने क्रिटिकल हैं बिकॉज इट इज लिंक्ड विद वन अनदर आइटम. वो दोनों आइटम्स लिंक्ड हैं, डेमोग्राफ एंड टेक टेक चेंज. जो टेक्नोलॉजी है आपकी वो तो इतना फाउंडेशनल एलिमेंट ऑफ चेंज है. रीजन बिकॉज टेक चेंज इज द ओनली थिंग दैट हैज essentially led to the rise and fall of some of the greatest empires. Ottomans supposedly collapsed because they didn't introduce printing machines in time. Mughal Empire collapsed because they didn't introduce industrialization in time. या जो करनी भी थी उन्होंने मुगल्स ने वो उन्होंने नहीं कर सके बिकॉज ब्रिटिश ऑलरेडी केम ओवर है। जो टेक एडेप्टेशन है ना वो इतना फंडामेंटल ब्लॉक है कि आप समझे कि देयर इज नथिंग एल्स दैट मैटर। सो यूथ, डेमोग्राफ्स एंड टेक्नोलॉजी आर द फंडामेंटल ड्राइवर्स जो आपको इस वक्त बता देगी प्रिसाइसली दिस इज एन एक्सटेंशन ऑफ योर body now, right?
It's a
That
weapon.
will
You
with
were
the
talking
youth.
about different weapons or not adapting in time and
या सो अब देखिए अगर यूथ एंड टेक को मैं एज अ फ्रेमवर्क लेता हूँ एंड सॉरी फॉर बीइंग एन एकेडमिक बट आई एम एकेडमिक इन दैट वे। सो अगर मैं इनको फ्रेमवर्क लेता हूँ और इस फ्रेमवर्क की बेसिस पे मैं प्रिडिक्ट करता हूँ तो आई जस्ट गिव यू अ वेरी सिंपल थॉट प्रोसेस ऑन दिस। और वो ये है कि इस वक्त आपका यूथ के साथ कौन है एंड यूथ के अगेंस्ट लड़ कौन रहा है। इस वक्त प्रो टेक्नोलॉजी कौन है और एंटी टेक्नोलॉजी कौन है। आई डोंट हैव टू इवन टेक नेम्स। मुझे नाम भी लेने की जरूरत नहीं है, पॉलिटिकल पार्टी ए, पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बी, पॉलिटिकल पार्टी सी। वाइप आउट द नेम। आप कोई भी एरा उठा लें, आप सिर्फ ये देख लें कि मेजर जो चंक ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन जो यूथ है वो किस साइड पे है और टेक प्रो कौन है और एंटी टेक कौन है। द मोमेंट यू रिकॉग्नाइज दिस थिंग आपको एक चीज इंस्टेंटली पता चल जाएगी वे टू क्लासिफाई द नेट रिजल्ट। A force that is fighting technology and youth at this time. I don't know what they are smoking, I don't know what they're eating, but you cannot win. आप जीत सकते ही नहीं है because there is a whole new generation that is watching you, seeing you, एंड दे विल नॉट रियली लाइक यू। एंड ये वो जनरेशन नहीं है जो बड़ी एक ताबेदार जनरेशन थी, हमारे फोर फादर्स की जनरेशन के घर में जो मर्जी गालियां भी दे दे, माँ बाप आपको चपेड़े भी मार दें तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता। दिस इज अ जनरेशन दैट इज रिवॉल्टेड अगेंस्ट द स्टेटस को स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम होम। ये वो जनरेशन है जो अपने माँ बाप की बात नहीं मानने के लिए तैयार या आपकी बात नहीं मानने लगी। सो द स्टेट कैन नॉट एक्ट लाइक इट इज अ फादर फिगर बिकॉज वो चीज।
यार हुसैन अब खुद ही बैठे हो तुम कैलिफोर्निया में और कह रहे हो व्हाट आर दे स्मोकिंग यार कसम से जस्ट जोकिंग
अगर अगर अच्छी चीज़ कर रहे हो स्मोक तो आप आगे भी निकल जाते हो, क्लैरिटी आ जाती है बट नॉट विद दैट।
especially in California, but यहाँ पे शायद maybe some mixing going on in Afghanistan or whatever. But driving the conversation a little bit back to this, ये तो बहुत यानी बहुत ही scary लगती है environment future जिस तरह आप बता रहे हैं। अगर हर चीज को quantify किया जा सकता है, prediction दी जा सकती है, so it's like it almost sounds like Minority Report. तो यानी free will का क्या हुआ फिर? Where is that margin?
सो
ये
द
क्या singularity की तरफ जा रहे हैं क्या हम लोग किसी?
सो सो फ्री विल तो देखिए ना कॉन्सेप्ट चेंज हो जाएगा फ्री विल का भी। बिकॉज़ वन थिंग यू फिगर्ड आउट दैट द होल प्लैनेट इज़ ऑपरेटिंग इन अ पर्टिकुलर साइकिल, राइट? सो ये नहीं हो रहा कि किसी दिन दिन पहले आ रहा है तो रात बाद में आ रही है, रात पहले आ रही है, दिन आ रहा है। एवरीथिंग इज़ इन अ पर्टिकुलर मोशन। एंड आप प्रिडिक्ट कर सकते हैं। फॉर इंस्टेंस आपने हाउ यू आर एबल टू प्रिडिक्ट द वेदर, राइट? यू आर एबल टू प्रिडिक्ट द के लूनर साइकिल्स कब होंगी। आप अगले 1000 साल की लूनर साइकिल्स प्रिडिक्ट कर सकते हैं, राइट? इन द सेम वे द ह्यूमन इटसेल्फ वी टेंड टू थिंक यार हम बहुत अनप्रिडिक्टेबल हैं। एक्चुअली यू आर नॉट। आपके इमोशंस हैं ही कितने? हैप्पी, सैड, समवेयर इन द मिडल। ठीक है? ये 3 इमोशंस के ऊपर आप प्ले कर रहे हैं। आपकी जो बॉडी की मूवमेंट्स हैं वो है ही कितनी आपकी आपकी इन अदर वर्ड्स आपकी जो डेटा इनपुट्स हैं, वो आपकी 5 सेंसेस हैं, राइट? अगर आपकी डेटा इनपुट्स ही इतनी स्मॉल हैं और जहाँ से इनपुट्स आ रही हैं, वो जो इन्फ्लुएंसेस हैं, दे आर सो ईज़िली आप उनको लेबल कर सकते हैं। तो आप तो हर ह्यूमन का एक्चुअली जो रिस्पॉन्स है, रिएक्शन है, वो ईज़िली कंप्यूट कर सकते हैं। एंड व्हिच बाय द वे देयर आर कंपनीज़ दैट डू दैट ऑन द डेली बेसिस जो आपकी मार्केटिंग कंपनी है, व्हाट यू लाइक, व्हाट यू डिसलाइक एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट। सो वो तो चीज़ आपकी ऑलरेडी एक्जिस्ट करती है। नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज कि हम स्टेट लेवल के ऊपर ये बिहेवियर कर सकते हैं। कैन वी फोरकास्ट द सिचुएशन एट द स्टेट लेवल? ऑफ कोर्स वी कैन। एंड उसके अंदर आपको एक्चुअली बहुत ज्यादा डेटा भी नहीं चाहिए। लेट मी मोर सिंप्लीफाई इट। आपको डेटा की जरूरत ही नहीं है उसके अंदर। यू जस्ट हैव टू फिगर आउट द प्रोसेस ऑफ हाउ थिंग्स वर्क। एंड इफ यू लुक एट वन थिंग जिसके अंदर आई बीन टॉकिंग अबाउट इट, सम पीपल आर आस्किंग यार व्हाई हैव यू बिकम सो वोकल ऑन इट? इट्स बिकॉज to me it is so obvious and visible where the country is headed. Yeah, I'm surprised that those that are running it to the ground can't see it. Any government that is built through illegitimate means will force itself and will try to survive through illegitimate means. उसका वो आके पब्लिक सर्विस नहीं कर सकते वहां पे, बिकॉज उनकी क्रेडिबिलिटी, लेजिटिमेसी जब क्वेश्चन में होगी, every single stakeholder in the system, and I worked in the system for 12 years, my civil, military, intel system, I know in and out because I've been a researcher in the system as well. You can tell that system जो कि illegitimate governments बन के आती हैं, system under pressure आता है. I'll give you another example of this. आपने अभी बात की कि मरीम नवाज जो चीफ मिनिस्टर का ओथ लेने जा रही थी, बाहर आपकी पूरी पुलिस की नफरी खड़ी की हुई है, आपके अंदर एमपीएस को नहीं आने दे रहे जो पीटीआई लिंक्ड है. Every single time you run a deployment like this, do you know the cost associated with that? The system का pressure कितना है and at what stake and at what price you're doing it? आपकी पूरी लाहौर की पुलिस जो है वो आपकी डिप्लॉय करके आपने एक स्पेसिफिक इंसान के साथ लगा दी, क्यों? क्योंकि वो इलेजिटिमेट है, उसकी कोई क्रेडिबिलिटी नहीं है, पब्लिक एक्सेप्टेंस नहीं है, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द लैक ऑफ दैट पब्लिक एक्सेप्टेंस नाउ दे नीड प्रोटेक्शन. प्रोटेक्शन फ्रॉम whom? The people that didn't vote for them, the public. So ये तो एक क्लासिक आपका केस है, जब इलेजिटिमेट गवर्नमेंट्स, इलेजिटिमेट टायरेंट्स आपके टेक ओवर करते हैं. उसका नेट रिजल्ट बड़ा सिंपल सा ही होता है कि दे ट्राई टू यूज स्टेट मसल. होता ही है कि स्टेट मसल एग्जॉस्ट हो जाता है आफ्टर 2 3 4 5 6 months. In this case right now, state muscle exhausted है पिछले 2 साल से. आप I'm not sure how much you've talked to any police people. I have quite a few people that I know in the police forces. Everyone is sick and tired. हर बंदा या तो फेलोशिप ले रहा है बाहर. Every single day I get messages from my friends in the police, DMG, and even in the forces कि यार कहीं पे फेलोशिप करवा दो, कहीं 2 3 साल के लिए पाकिस्तान से निकलना चाहते हैं. एवरीवन. अब जब इसका चेन रिएक्शन होता है तो नेट रिजल्ट इसका ये है कि सिस्टम के अंदर से प्रेशर आएगा, एंड द पर्सन ऑन द टॉप, बी इट एन इलेजिटिमेट चीफ मिनिस्टर और बी इट एन इलेजिटिमेट प्राइम मिनिस्टर, दे विल बी कट शॉर्ट. टेन्योर्स ना पूरे होंगे, काम भी नहीं कर सकेंगे और धक्के मार के बाहर निकाला जाएगा इनको. So in that situation, it is not hard to put two and two together, which I've been trying to basically talk about. Ke this is a collapsed government before it even formed the government. So unfortunate, whoever is pushing these people or how they're pushing themselves to be in power. I hope that made sense,
What
though.
you what you're trying to say what you're trying to say is कि basically आपको artificial intelligence की ज़रूरत नहीं है to have common sense to to see कि अगर आप train wreck देख रहे हैं, you don't
Artificial,
need a computation or an algorithm to tell you, oh listen, this is gonna happen and it's gonna be really bad.
artificial
And
intelligence.
the reason I ask you this, the
Yeah, yeah,
reason I ask you this is because you mentioned at the beginning that you worked for or with Ehsan Iqbal.
yeah,
एहसन इकबाल और मेरी एक स्टोरी है और आई हैव टू बी आई हैव टू थैंक अहमद फॉर दैट इनकाउंटर. 2017 की बात है, मैं किसी रैंडम चीज के लिए लाहौर आया हुआ था, मुझे कोई डॉक्यूमेंट साइन करने थे 2017 में डीएचए में. और उस वक्त ये फैजाबाद धरना शुरू हुआ,
yeah,
हंगामा हुआ, खादिम हुसैन रिजवी. तो खैर एनीवेज मैंने खादिम हुसैन रिजवी का इंटरव्यू पकड़ा गुजरांवाला में, जब वो अपना वो काफला लेके इस्लामाबाद से
yeah.
वो पैसे वैसे लेने के बाद वापस आ रहा था. और एक डाला था गुजरांवाला पे इंटरचेंज के अंदर, और कोई तकरीबन 8-9 हज़ार बंदा भाग रहा है यानी उसके पीछे, डाले के पीछे, और लाइट्स लगी हुई हैं और स्पीकर्स के ऊपर एक बड़ा ही क्रेजी यानी माहौल था. तो इंटरव्यू हमने किया और वो कह रहे हैं कि जी हम जीत गए, सब कुछ ये वो. तो मैंने कहा इसको बैलेंस करने के लिए मुझे वहां से कहा कि इसको बैलेंस करना होगा इसी गवर्नमेंट वॉइस से. तो उस वक्त एहसन इकबाल वाज इंटीरियर मिनिस्टर,
जी,
शहबाज शरीफ वाज द चीफ मिनिस्टर ऑफ पंजाब.
yeah,
2017 एंड की बात है ये.
yeah,
तो अहमद helped arrange an interview with his father. And वो इंटरव्यू मैंने किया, मैंने उनसे पूछा कि हाउ कैन द स्टेट अलाउ दिस, एंड ही वाज वेरी सेंसिबल. हिज आंसर्स एट दैट टाइम बड़े ही सेंसिबल आंसर्स थे मुझे लगे. कि कहा कि हाँ कोई भी स्टेट ऐसा उसकी रिट को इस तरह चैलेंज करके मुश्किल हो जाता है उसके लिए. बट नाउ व्हेन यू सी अ वेरी कॉमन सेंसिकल sort of guy take positions that are completely against the common sense of the people, right? How does that make sense? कि बहुत ही commonsensical, rational people lose their objectivities को कह लें. I guess nobody's objective in that sense. Everyone has biases, and that's how you operate. But
so
go ahead.
I so yeah, I've never talked about this thing because Essence Saab has been my boss and a mentor for a while. So I have a lot of respect for him. I do respect him for his wisdom, for his foresight, for his balance overall in life, and his way of working as well. I actually learned a lot of my early trainings were with SNSAB at the Ministry of Planning. That was my first stint in the policy sector, second in actually, but the first stint in the ministry. So I learned a lot from him, and I really look up to him in that way. And yet I also have a lot of differences with him over the time period, where I don't agree to a lot of things, the way he's done his politics in many ways. But that's more on the personal level. I respect the person, but at the same time you don't have to respect the politics in many ways. I do think that the sometimes path dependencies are very kind of like it kind of becomes an imprison to yourself. It becomes a prison of yourself, that you started on a particular path in the 80s, right? And then you continue to walk on that path for so long that even when the environment pushes you to change or you should change, it's too late to change by stepping out. So what you try to do instead, which I think Esan Saab has been trying to do, is he wants to stay in the system within the PMLN and try to bring the change from within. Now, this is exactly what my mentality had been for a very long time, partly because I also worked with him, was that by being inside the system is where you can cause real change. So work inside, work within the parameters, and from that will change. Till I became disillusioned because I realized that the true change can never really occur from within. It has to be pushed from the outside through the means of innovation and technology. And part of the reason I say that is because we're not living in the bronze ages. We're living at a time when the tech growth has been exponential. And these two things, the tech growth and the demographic growth, the population growth, have simultaneously collided with each other because each helped the other. जैसे जैसे पॉपुलेशन ऊपर जा रही थी, हमारी टेक भी ऊपर जा रही थी, टेक ऊपर जा रही थी तो पॉपुलेशन भी आपकी हुई. Partly because of agriculture, farming, society, sanitation and all, we started living longer, started reproducing more and surviving more. So हमारी उस तरह से चली. So I think in case of Ehsan Saab, I think it is his philosophy of change is more linked to being in a system, pushing the change through the system, even when you know that the system may be wrong and all. Because from his perspective, I believe he thinks that not like any other political party is good, not like anyone else is good, right? So why do I have to change the track now, or let's say change a political party or step out when I've already made it to a particular level where I have a voice? So I'll stick inside and start bringing change. That's one perspective. Do I agree with it? Maybe not. Will it work? Maybe he's successful in bringing some change within the PMLN. Maybe he's successful in bringing change to the national level through his association from that particular political party. I don't know how that would work. I would love to see that way, but as a human, super intelligent, very ethical, great person.
I guess I was just trying to use Essen Iqbal as a jumping board
Yeah.
to this idea of, you know, set actions or rationality or common sense. And in societies like Pakistan, जहाँ पे आप कह रहे हैं कि जी टिकटॉक बहुत अब इंक्रीज हो चुका है, उसकी यूसेज और हर किसी के पास है, बाहर जाएं तो हर बंदे के पास टिकटॉक है और अपना अनबिलीवेबल नंबर्स के साथ एंगेजमेंट वो लोग कर रहे हैं. तो उस इंटरसेक्शन पे कॉमन सेंस बिकम्स डिफरेंट फॉर डिफरेंट पीपल, राइट? एक जनरेशनल चीज भी हो जाती है ये फिर.
So I work in the AI domain, and let me tell you upfront that common sense is the hardest thing to develop in AI, right? We tend to think because just we say that common sense है तो like normally आ जाएगी, but in narrow जो sense है ना आपकी specific narrow sense, वो develop करना ज़रा ज़्यादा आसान है. The common sense, for instance, which is one of the reasons you'll notice that some of the greatest scientists in the world ended up supporting Hitler, right? Which was against the common sense. Some of the greatest policy makers around the world in the US ended up supporting the wars that common sense wouldn't allow you to support, be it Gaza, be it Vietnam. I mean, our own Dr. Kissinger, who died recently, one of the smartest humans to have alive, right? To have lived, right? And
Oppenheimer dropping that bomb. Well, he didn't drop it, but he
exactly
developed it.
developed it. So I would put these two things very separate. That somebody could be very smart in a one way, would have great sense, but he may actually miss the common sense. So these are two very, very different areas of how people learn and behave. But I think to respond to your question, I think I know what you're getting at. The fundamental challenge that what you're talking about in the sense is in Pakistan is the confirmation bias built on top of echo chambers and systems that continue to lie over and over again as reporting mechanisms. So within the institution, for instance, or within even the political party, so political party has a slightly less confirmation bias until you're at the very top political dynast, where you're Mariam Nawaz or Nawaz Sharif and everybody telling around you is telling you that we're winning a landslide. The net result is PTI won a landslide. So that's something that happens with the political dynast because they're lazy. By
Yeah, but it wasn't just happening to the political dynasts, it was also happening in other core groups.
The funny part is that most of the core groups knew what was going to happen. The problem is nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news to the political dynasty, right? You don't want to be the falling one out because then you have five other people sitting there wanting to
Was
cut.
it about the dynasty or was it about the other dynasty, you know?
I
The other
don't.
legacy organization?
So the parent organization, you mean?
Yes,
The
indeed.
parent, the way the parent organization works is even more fascinating because, and I tweeted about it recently as well. It is the reporting mechanism over there. And because I've studied these institutions in a much more detail, the saddest part about these institutions is that they have a reporting mechanism, and every individual who's going to be reporting the ground situation, it cannot be a bad reporting. So everybody wants to win the report. He wants to please his boss, and his boss wants to please his boss, his boss, his boss. So if the direction from the top is that you want to get this done ABC, the
So it's the
report.
mother of all confirmation biases, basically.
Oh, it is the
It's like the Moab of confirmation
The whole
bias.
institution is built on fundamentally a confirmation bias. Now, confirmation bias for that institution is an integral default standard. Reason because they have to fight a war. And in war, you must have a confirmation bias that the other person is an enemy because when the push comes to the shove, you're not going to be thinking philosophically whether I shoot or not. You must have such a strong confirmation bias that you're able to pull the trigger. So the institutional training is such that they're trained to not make good decisions. They're trained to follow orders. Now, if that institution comes into power, institution that has never taken decisions, individuals that are not trained to be the decision makers, have no sense of reality outside of the garrisons.
It leads to deadlock.
No, not just a deadlock. It leads to a bloody collapse because now you have people who are not trained decision makers, who are cut off from reality, who have a very strong confirmation bias based on the beliefs that they've developed. And now the situation is if they think that they're winning, how dare they not win? They have to
Yeah,
win.
but see, it's like a hornet's nest. It's the structure remains, it's hollowed out. It
Yeah.
might not collapse. It's like fossilized, right? Almost. So it's
Nothing.
hardened and coralized, and you
I
can't
mean,
uproot it that easily. And that's why you have Asif Ali Zardari as president. It's like 2008 almost, like,
yeah, it's all over again.
rewind, the memory goes back. Asif Ali Zardari has been elected from both the chambers.
But I think one of the things that the myth that has continued to float in Pakistan, specifically peddled by particular institutions, is that we're too big to fail. Grow big enough, make Pakistan dependent on you, make Pakistan's survival linked to your survival, and then you're big enough to collapse. That I think that kind of narrative has already been called bluff. The Americans called the bluff on that a few years back. Uh, Now I think the people of Pakistan have also called bluff on that. I don't think that this concept that institutions can continue to survive and thrive in perpetuity is
Well,
true.
why not? Why not? It depends on the empire, right? Let's flip it around. Let's flip it around, right? You're talking about all these ideas, and you're talking about Pakistan as like a case study, but you also have to account for empire, right? How the empire operates. Sitting in the United States, we
Yeah,
know there are many layers. और ये भी एक इल्जाम लगाया जाता है ना यार, एक तरफ तो आप कहते हैं कि अमेरिकी साजिश,
yeah.
सही, एक तरफ तो आप कहते हैं अमेरिकी साजिश और एक डेविल्स एडवोकेट ये आर्गुमेंट भी है, और दूसरी तरफ आप जाके उन्हीं यानी रो खन्ना आपके लिए निकाल रहा है एक टिकटॉक पे जाके आई एम गेटिंग ऑन टिकटॉक, वो कह रहा कि मैं ये जो हो रहा है धांधली की जब तक नहीं होगी। तो अमेरिका एक यानी एक मोनोलिथ नहीं है, मगर एम्पायर जिस तरीके से ऑपरेट करती है, वोकनेस, political correctness, some like, all right, Trump is like a demagogue, whatever. But अगर आप पेलोसी को देखें या और एलिमेंट जो बाइडेन को अगर आप देखें, और जिस तरीके से उन लोगों ने पाकिस्तान के साथ डील किया है पिछले अ, ये केबल्स उनको उनको एक साइफर भेजने की जरूरत नहीं है। मैं ये कहता हूं हमेशा, अगर उन्होंने कोई चीज करानी थी जनरल बाजवा से, अभी मैं मेंटेन करता हूं, सही है, इतना सब कुछ हो जाने के बावजूद। बट एक चीज को मैं नहीं डिनाई कर सकता, एटलीस्ट आई स्टडीड इन द यूएस, बोथ अंडर ग्रेड, I sense the society, and most of the people don't even know where Pakistan is. They'll probably place Pakistan by Venezuela, despite having access to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
So here's my
the role of empire in all of this,
so here is my thought
apart
on
from
this.
AI modeling.
Yeah. So my thought on this is rather very simple. Or वो ये कि I am glad you said that America is not a monolithic society, right? The power is not monolithic. There are different arms of the institutions that operate in very different ways, have very different interests. Uh, the White House right now has a particular clear preference on who it wants in power in Pakistan. Nawaz Sharif. I think the Biden administration couldn't have made it more clear, and it's not just from now; it is historic connection that Biden had during his vice presidency. If you look at the WikiLeaks cables, there is a lot of ample evidence on the relationship, and then later on as well. So I think they have made a very clear preference who they would like to see in as a preference, and that's fine. I mean, recently Justin Trudeau basically called out called out Donald Trump that this is going to be a really really bad thing for Canada. So countries say that, countries do that. Do countries then deliberately act on making those events happen? I'm pretty sure Canada can't do that. But within the American politics, there are a lot of stakes involved, right? So there are lobbies, both domestic, both international, in the US that want their little bit movement, right? So they would maybe want that Biden would win, maybe Russia would want that Trump would win, etc., etc. So the influences are there. How much they actually flip the elections is a different thing. But to say that countries don't influence elections around the world is living in a cuckoo's land. So one thing. Second thing, the power way the way it's structured in the US, it's a very decentralized structure of power. The Congress, the Senate, the State Department, the Pentagon, they all operate in different ways, and then they all have different partners. At one point, I remember I was working in the foreign policy. The State Department and White House was gung ho against Pakistan, wanted sanctions, etc., etc. The one to say was actually the DoD, because the DoD
Pentagon.
had a very different, long-standing connection with Pakistan, and they are still Pakistan's biggest lobby in the United States, right? So it's the DoD connection that
They
it has.
tried to change that with the Kerry Lugar Berman legislation.
Yeah.
Tried
So
to,
my
like, shove $7.5 billion towards the then People's Party
my
government.
first
But
yeah, so my first book is actually on the Kerry Lugar Berman bill, and it actually accounts for the U.S. power structure. So these different have a very different thing. So yes, the PTI is talking about and has been talking about the Biden administration in getting itself too embroiled, too deep into Pakistan's mess, and they wanted to change. Uh, I can believe that. I can also reject that. But there is the truth is somewhere in the middle. Something happened. It's not like that nothing happened at all. Biden presidency had acted in a particular way, not just in Pakistan but around the world, where they had very clear preferences against particular individuals. And I think over the time period they have shown that. So the silence of the Biden administration does tell a lot about where they are putting it. But at the same time, the PTI is tapping into the congressional power. People who are more on the side of they want democracy around the world, they want anti-authoritarian regimes and all of that. So they're tapping into that, which is fine, by the way. That happens at any given point, even during the time in the World War II when the US had not officially joined, both Germany and British, they both were lobbying in the United States. Germany was lobbying the US to stay out of the war, and
yes,
Britain were forcing the US to join the war. Germany
and
was
it was
wiped.
on the knife's edge. If Pearl Harbor hadn't happened, they
Yeah,
wouldn't might not have. enter the
So
war.
precisely. So I think that's one element of it where we say that the foreign powers. I mean, it's a very interconnected world, right? The influences have a direct connections. It's not like the things that happen in Pakistan don't have a reaction anywhere else in the world. I mean, if Pakistan goes to collapses, the net result will be felt around the world. It's a country of 240 million people. Just the refugee crisis, just the crisis that may come out
It's
of
got nuclear weapons.
nuclear weapons, it's a problem. So the US does have stakes. Now, when you talk about that the US, the people in the US don't care about Pakistan, sure, people in the US don't really know about Pakistan. But that's not true for the organizations that have budgets of billions of dollars that work in national security space. They have very dedicated sections on Pakistan. They have a very dedicated teams in Pakistan. Half of the think tanks in actually have not have almost all the think tanks in the US have a Pakistan desk. They talk about Pakistan, they have events on Pakistan, and as far as US is concerned, it would invade Guatemala over bananas, let alone anything else. So I mean, US doesn't really have a very great history on involvement in other parts of the world. If they can do that for the UFC, the United Foods Company, not very far back in time, I'm pretty sure Pakistan is way important than bananas that the US would be in getting involved in. But the
Or
question,
not, or maybe not,
I
because
mean,
it's always been like a
not,
client
yeah. Okay, what
rentier sort of a relationship.
like again I said, I do think that the preferences are made. These preferences are made. Like, look, this is going to be more preferable to us. That's going to be more preferable to us. It came out at a time which was wrong because Biden administration didn't have any specific connection with the Imran Khan's administration over here. The overall situation with the BUNC and let me remind you the U.S.
Wait, wait,
administration.
wait, wait, wait. You said the Biden administration didn't have any particular position on the Imran Khan government,
No, no, I did.
despite.
I think by having a completely shutting down the connection with the government in Pakistan, Imran Khan's government in Pakistan, specifically during the Afghanistan crisis, I think it kind of made the Biden admin made very clear that it was not interested in dealing with Pakistan. Now, be it with Pakistan or be it with the Imran Khan administration, the message was very clear. There was no ambassador over here. There were there
They were
were
running it through a charge d'affaires who was meeting
Yes.
General
Uh,
Bajwa
there were, I
ahead
mean,
of the. Yeah.
there was Afghanistan crisis going on. We needed better coordination. I was in the government
And
at
there was a
that.
lot of coordination from, well, I was in Kabul leading up to the evacuation. I was there from the 19th of August till the 15th of September.
Yeah,
And I found out later on that General Bajwa was directly involved. His office was, because the Air Force couldn't give the bans, couldn't authorize, because they'd already like given God knows how many
yeah.
bans, overhead bans, apparently, whatever that means. So they said, okay, what if we contact? They told the Air Force guys, what if we contact General Bajwa's office directly? Would that be okay with you? And they were like, yeah, fine, go ahead. And then they got whatever they wanted.
So that was at the DoD level, mostly because they were the ones operating. The White House was very much absent throughout this entire episode. So was the State Department, by the way. There was a lot of chaos within the US policy community. Again, like we said, the US policy community is not a very joined up whole of government committees, right?
It's not a
There's
monolithic entity, you know.
disjointed. It's a very large elephant, right? It's very detached, decentralized, and they don't have any specific overlaps. I mean, if
It's like
you
empires in decline.
yeah. So there is that there was that problem. Now the situation became wrong, and then you had these the U.S. charge d'affaires over here was going around and meeting political parties, which is by the way normal. It happens, but it was coming out so openly on the social media that people were joining
Wait, wait,
dots.
wait, wait, wait. Time out there as well. They were going and meeting political parties, and according to direct sources, some of these political leaders were being told by these British, especially this British High Commissioner, appears quite a bit in these conversations. Her name is apparently Jane Marriott. और वो conversations क्या होती हैं कि bad mouthing Imran Khan, and this is before, like late last year, before all of this kind of went into high gear.
So Jane wasn't here until then. It was actually Dr. Turner, Christian Turner, who was here. He was very actively involved throughout, and I do know that they didn't have a very positive opinion on Imran Khan due to his Ukraine stance and his trip to Russia. So that was the case. Before that, they didn't have too much of a problem. But the for the Britain, the UK, for the UK, the Ukrainian thing was a big change of heart. So, like again, I said, the preferences were there, the interests were there. Now, I shudder to comment on what the conversations were. I wasn't part of those conversations. But knowing the history, knowing the background, having read all the WikiLeaks, I do think that countries that do not have the financial muscle, that have operated as a sort of higher guns for the global empire. Uh, the foreign powers exert a lot of influence for them, and the greatest piece of evidence for that is that how about 14 different ambassadors wrote an open letter urging Pakistan to join the Ukraine war in help to the Western Front. Now, they didn't do the same in India, who took a much more, I would say, they took a back step. They said that we'll deal with Russia, we'll take the oil from them, and yeah, we'll provide a lip service to condemn the war around the world. So their stance was exactly what stance was Imran Khan was taking, right? Yet the responses to the two countries were different. Part of the reason is because the UK and Americans cannot exert that level of influence over India. Over Pakistan, it can. So they do what they can in Pakistan in a different way. And I mean, that's unfortunately where you are in the global power status and structure. Unavoidable things. So we can cry about it, we
So
can
sad.
talk about it.
So
I'm
sad.
not sure what's
I
that.
hope I hope that doesn't get you in trouble, you know.
It's an outcome of the.
You're at this level in the pecking order, boys. You ain't getting nowhere. Well, that's why, I guess जो बंदा खड़ा हुआ था उसको अंदर कर दो. और ये भी एक साइकिल है. 45 50 years ago भी यही हुआ था ना. 45
Yeah.
years ago भी यही हुआ था ना.
So the
तो कहते
Zulfikar.
हैं कि 80 year cycles and then 40 year mini cycles in or like loops.
Now it's interesting you say that because if you the political parties, the two mainstream, the PPP and PMLN, basically say that Imran Khan is talking nonsense. This is not true and all. But if you actually read Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's book, The Myth of Independence, you'll read the first few paragraphs and you'll know it almost feels like that Imran Khan took word to word of what he said and just contextualized it in 2024 and said it out. I mean, Bhutto basically talked every single thing about this, that we got the country, we don't have the independence, we have too much reliance on the Western countries, and they dictate to us. The whole Kissinger episode with Bhutto has been quoted and all. So yeah, I think this is not the first time anyone has said it. Nawaz Sharif has continued to say that America told me not to do this and I did that, and the whole populist narrative that he ran in the 90s. It's nothing new. Every single politician, and even the state, for instance, the state narrative is also the same thing. I mean, the state
Yeah,
is
but
reducing.
see, listen. I think the vehicle makes a difference. Yeah, okay, everyone's trying to say the same thing, trying to get to the same ends.
Yeah,
Human needs are the same, but
yeah,
once in a while, there's this idea, this anomaly,
yeah,
right? That's the attraction, right? Because
yeah,
you're like, और ये अपना मुझे पता है हिना रबानी खर ने भी कुछ दिन पहले म्यूनिक सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल के अंदर she gave an interview there and she was demagoguery, Imran as a demagogue, a populist along the lines of Modi and Trump, and I found that so like intellectually dishonest.
I
And I have
mean,
a lot of listen, I have a lot of respect for Hina Rabbani Kar. She knows
it's
what
not
she's
bad.
talking about. But when people like that like indulge in such blatant like I
But
don't even know gaslighting,
it serves
you're
the
like,
purpose.
what is going on, dude?
If you look at I mean, the reason why they continue to say that he's a populist, he's a demigod, and all of that is because these people, I would say, a particular class in Pakistan, they're very plugged to the global society and global narratives, right? So the definitions they take from there, the labels they take from there, and they somehow try to force those labels in presenting the people on the leaders over here to the international audience. Like calling Imran Khan populist is pretty crazy because, but I can also understand why they say that because it kind of triggers the fears of the Western society that, oh, populists, when they think of it, it is all the right wing populist movements that are anti migration, anti diversity, anti this, etc., right? So they see Imran Khan and they think that, oh, populist, he must be anti migration. The dude has given citizenship to Afghanis I mean, it's unbelievable how he has allowed that, like, to have them ID cards, to regularize, naturalize them, and all of that. He's not a populist in a way where the right wing populism actually is happening around Europe and the US. So some of our intellectual elite, unfortunately, they try to play on the fears of the Western society to present the local leaders as, oh, if you don't work with us, we are the only people that can save your interest. These guys, these are Islamists, these are terrorists. That's exactly what General Musharraf did for a very long time, and all the politicians did. That presenting to the US that, look, I'm a liberal moderate. My country, crazy ass people, all Islamists, all hardliners.
Savages, savages, brown savages.
Yeah, yeah. I actually wrote, committed a whole section in my book on this. And then there's a
ये तो
funny history.
ओरिएंटलिज्म यानी ओरिएंटलिज्म वो है ना कि देखो अगर तुम नेगोशिएट करना है उन जानवरों से डील करना है इन जानवरों से तो तुम्हें हम जैसे चाहिए हैं
So
यानी
that's a
हम जैसे कोकोनट इट्स दैट ओरिएंटल लाइक क्लासिक ओरिएंटलिस्ट लाइक
point.
colonial mindset.
It is our elite actually never changed. They continue to sell our own people as wild, ungovernable, savages, Islamists, terrorists. They continue to add these ists on top of the people and presenting them as somehow that these people are crazy, and the West would be lucky that we're here to serve them. Now, this is exactly what has continued to happen for actually the last 70 years. Different governments have tried to do that. Military governments have done it, democrat governments have done it. There's a very interesting article by Benazir Bhutto, The Price of Dictatorship, in The Guardian. And if you read that, it is interesting because she took the narrative that was propelled by the Musharraf regime, that the people are crazy, and used the same narrative to tell the Americans that, look, actually the source of all the terrorism, the source of all the Islamist radicalism is actually the military. So you need to work with me against them. So it is literally the same script that continues to go. And if you look at Khwaja Asif's not recent, a few years back, he was at the Asia Foundation. And what he was saying with the whole suit and tie was, Imran Khan is a right wing conservative. He's an Islamist. We are the liberals. Talk to
ओ
us.
यार तालिबान खान भी तो कहते थे तालिबान खान भी लेबल
Taliban.
लगा मैंने भी उससे पूछा था इमरान खान से वो कहता है मैं आई एम नॉट आई एम एंटी वॉर
Yeah, yeah.
आई एम नॉट प्रो एनीथिंग आई एम एंटी वॉर
So it doesn't take too much common
आई एम
sense to understand all of this.
एंटी आर्म्ड सॉल्यूशंस यू नो
Yeah. Because armed solutions help only a particular set of people and institutions in the country and in the world. So I think I hope I make myself clear on this part, that why such labels are very important, because you're constantly catering to a global audience, triggering to their fears, working around their fears, and using those fears to change the local level politics. Because in Pakistan, in states like Pakistan, post-colonial world, a lot of changes are directly linked to the changes in the empire. For instance, I'll give you one example. If Trump wins tomorrow, the net result on the Pakistani politics is going to be very, very different. All of a sudden, you'll realize that the White House is not going to be very much actively involved in whatever is happening. All of a sudden, you realize a
यार बात
particular.
सुन कसम से मैंने ये सवाल आई वांट यू टू एक्सपैंड ऑन दिस मैंने ये सवाल पूछा था कुछ हफ्ते पहले की बात है इलेक्शन से एक दो दिन आगे पीछे जेफरी सैक्स वो एक आया हुआ था एक अपना इन्होंने ऑर्गेनाइज किया था कोई ऑनलाइन
Yeah, yeah,
um, उसके ऊपर अपना आया हुआ था मैंने उससे पूछा कि what will happen if Trump which he's projected to wins in November what will happen and he's like you know Trump is also a very disruptive force I wouldn't comment on that वो बात गोल कर गया वो
yeah,
what will happen to Pakistan मेरा सवाल था ना in the Pakistan context
yeah.
क्योंकि जिस तरह ये लोग चल रहे हैं बाइडेन की पीठ पीछे या जो ब्लिंकन और ये मिलर्स कमेंट्स आउट ऑफ द स्टेट डिपार्टमेंट it's disgusting.
Well, that's a general Biden policy around the world as well. I mean, they've screwed up their entire foreign policy, be it Pakistan, be it Gaza. Pakistan is less talked about, but when the history is written, I think that the Pakistan would come out as a very powerful case study on how Biden administration completely ruined a relationship for its very obvious politicizing and getting very deeply involved in the local level politics that it shouldn't have, by the way, or at least keeping the principle set. And I think as far as the Trump administration goes, you see, there are two things that are going to happen. Firstly, whenever there is a change in the government from Democrats, Republicans, or Republicans to Democrats, you'll see a particular change in the whole policy, because there are about 3 to 5,000 new individuals that come into the administration, right? And 3,000, 5,000 individuals that will link to the Democratic Party, they will be flushed out. The new people that will come out, what is their orientation on the foreign policy, right? So people like John Bolton's, people like let's say conservative elements that will be there, who have one very specific interest for the US to cut back from any foreign interferences. Republicans have been much more interested in that historically, that they don't want America to extend its power outside of the, I mean, in Ukraine, in Gaza, elsewhere. So you'll notice a significant change in policy of the US, where it will take 5 steps back. Now, that is very good, because the Pakistan needs to be operated on its own. Let the organic power structure play it out, instead of the US, making sure that we endorse this, we endorse that. So that's going to happen. But in this case, there is another element to it. It's not just the Republican Conservative Party. There's also a guy on top who's coming from a conservative bloc, but is a very different brand of politics, which is President Trump. Now, President Trump's personal likeness, personal engagement, and personal interaction with Imran Khan may or may not have an impact, but the likely chances are that the White House, which is very anti-Imran right now, they've made it very blatantly clear. I'm not making this up. They're making it very clear. It will have, if it will not go pro Imran Khan, it will actually become neutral on Imran Khan. And I think neutrality is all what you need in this situation, because the institutions here,
Ambivalence.
ambivalence, because the otherwise the people on the ground have already spoken, right? So again, the three A's that run in Pakistan, I think on that part, the mixture has to be the right element. And I'll give you a good example of this thing is that nearing the finishing of the tenure of President Bush in 2006 and 7, that is directly linked to also the collapse of the Musharraf regime, right? So during his end, Condoleezza Rice got Musharraf, Benazir Bhutto to sign an agreement, passageway to her come back so that it could survive. But the day Bush got out, Obama came in, it was done deal
It
for.
was done deal, yeah.
There was nothing else that was going to happen. The message was very clear. So I think in this situation as well, it may also be a very quick change of situation on ground.
वेरी क्विक सिचुएशन ऑन ग्राउंड बट नवंबर तक किसने देखा है भाई जो अभी चल रहा है ये तो फिल्म में एक ये चैप्टर शुरू होने वाला है क्योंकि इमरान रियाज का कोई वो पकड़ लिया किसी करप्शन केस के ऊपर असद तूर को पकड़ा हुआ था लास्ट रिपोर्ट्स के ऊपर तो
So
और
here's
वहां
the
पे
thing
अपना
in
ये
this part, that one thing that has
फुल
changed.
सर्कल आ गया ये तो यानी कोई ब्रेक नहीं आई इस चीज के अंदर
Yeah. So
you
one
know
thing.
no matter what your analysis would have been like
Yeah.
you could you have predicted this landslide
So
of PTI for example despite all of this I
so
couldn't have
so if you were to predict based on the data, yes, every prediction would tell you that this is going to be the result. But if you would predict, when you compute the level of rigging, then the variable would become that what would be the voter turnout. Because I worked in the political campaigns and election campaigns. It's not easy to rig the elections. People might think that it is easy. There are thousands of polling stations. We don't have the we don't have the institutional structure, even if you want to rig every one of them, to rig all of that. So election is one day where all rules and all power structures are basically cut open, and which is what we see in that day, that the only power on the day is actually the people. So if the people come out in large numbers, the level of rigging is almost impossible, which is why they wanted to keep the voter turnout low, make sure that there is enough violence, that there is you used violence as a deterrence. But people came out, people voted, and at 11 o'clock at night, you realize that things have gone bad. So you stopped the entire election process, and then in the morning the results started shifting. So it doesn't take, I mean, again, just needs common sense to know what exactly happened. So the election, the ability to actually, for any state organization to manipulate at that level, becomes very, very difficult. And I think this is where the uh, the ability to project based on the data is there, but you also have to put a variable on how much the institution has an ability to execute its desired results. Now, I've already mentioned that the institutions in the country are exhausted. They're playing against the system. But what happened on the 8th is one thing which is most powerful. that, I mean, frankly, it was a duel, right? It was not about anyone else. It was one man against one man, right? I don't have to name the people. It was one versus one. And
But it wasn't just one man, you know. Each vote counted.
yeah,
Millions came out for that one man. The
but the
other guy,
but the overall space, right? It was literally a fight between the guy here and the guy here, and the rest everything is basically the formality around it, the election, the vote, and all of that. But when that kind of like duel happens, and a particular wave went on this side of the aisle, uh, people drew blood, people got a taste of blood, and then the system started working and figuring out the changing of directions. So I think the direction is already changed. It will take time, but the system now, and I'm talking about the Pakistani system, which is not one institution, which is a very, very large, uh, very diverse, very, very deep,
complex.
complex structure, and people have a lot of power down in the system. So those that are trying to reform FBR through force will very soon see what FBR is capable of doing when you touch their areas. So so the system cannot sustain this for too long when there is an institutional intervention in in their organizations,
To
right?
what, be a predator? The system can't continue to be a
So
yeah, but the system can't be continue to be a predator. It can't become more centralized, more authoritative, because the veil of this,
yeah,
oh, and also the economic intelligence unit, economist intelligence unit, degrading Pakistan
yeah.
to an authoritarian regime. So yeah, it can become a predatory, right? Even if it is tired.
So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the system is now operating and functioning against the very leadership on the top. The system has kind of revolted within inside. Part of the reason, again, I'm saying is that system is exhausted. System has been completely manipulated for a very long time, be it judiciary, be it bureaucracy, be it policing. The folks there are exhausted, and I think it would be good for you and any investigative journalist to actually go down deep to the people that are implementing the orders. They're exhausted. They didn't sign up for this. So it's not that those people are sheep. They have a voice, and the way they then
The
take the
signals
reverse.
guy, the signals colonel in Lahore, for example, the signals colonel in Lahore, for example, who said,
So
but what difference does it make? You're exhausted, you keep fighting, yo. And you got to listen to that one guy. Confirmation bias again. We're back to that circle.
yeah,
We're completing a loop.
but I think the collapse then becomes fast tracked because if you lose the support of the system is unable to then cater to your needs. And if you are an illegitimate government, or if you want to pursue illegitimate means, it is a system that is going to be implementing it, right? So when the system is refusing, or when the system is not able to do it, either way, either it refuses flat up, which it doesn't. The other thing is that the system is unable to do it. For instance, the confirmation bias was there, right? That we will make sure that PTI doesn't win, this and that, and yet the system didn't deliver. So somebody in the system had been reporting that everything is in control when nothing was in control, right? So the system is acting against the leadership, and that is the worst place to be, because the guy on the top is very powerless. It's a system that has to be very smooth. Now, the system starts functioning against you. It's a matter of time. I mean, that's exactly what happened to General Musharraf. We don't even have to go back to Ziaul Haq. Same thing happened to him. Same thing happened to Musharraf. And I'm not saying that, like, but there will be a very sudden change. If I have to make a prediction, expect change very soon, very quick, because it's not sustainable anymore, and the blood has been drawn. So it's not even that you have projected power, you've basically projected weakness. And in our Punjab culture, we say that people only attack when they see weakness. They don't attack the person who's very powerful. They attack the weak. So yeah, I do think there is going to be a very drastic changes.
Wow. People only attack the weak. Human nature summed up. We're approaching an hour. I have one more question. And I know you've been amazing. You've inspired a lot of the viewers, the comments, the few comments that we've gotten. There's a question from ZM. What's the future of think tanks in Pakistan? And eventually, if eventually, he's saying when, if eventually armed forces take over. Um, and also freedom of expression. the traditional safeguards or guardians of truth. And we saw Karachi Literature Festival, crude jokes there, so almost like, the intelligentsia is in line with the elites, with these people that are trying to race against time, as you say, when blood has already been drawn. So a little bit of reflection on that, and then we can call it.
So let's start with the future of think tanks in Pakistan. Since I've worked in one, developed a few, I don't think there is any. Uh, I mean, it's hard to say because the think tanks in Pakistan are very traditional, and they refuse to undertake reforms. Most of the think tanks have become kind of like a kitty parties for retired officials, their friends and their friends. They keep inviting them, call it a roundtable, discuss the same ideas over and over again. You'll see the repeated words: reimagining Pakistan, rethinking national security, reconceptualizing national security. Publish some plagiarized work, get done with it. So it's basically mouthpieces. Again, like I said, for the reporting system, you have to check boxes that we have done 10 events this month, we have done 50 papers and all of that. All that have no productive value either domestically or globally. So even if you shut down every think tank in the country, it will have actually it will be better for the exchequer because it will be ending up saving money unless until the think tanks undertake reforms. They become true thinking spaces, and not tanks, thinking spaces. Start churning out content that is fit for the digital age, uh, not fit for the dinosaur age, which where they are in right now. So that's that. The second question was related to the what would happen if the military would take over. Is that was that the
Well,
question?
I think that was part of the first question.
So the
What
military
would
would take
happen
over
to think tanks if
or
the
the
military eventually takes over? Or
uh,
what would happen to these independent think tanks if the military comes and takes over the country? Will they keep operating? Will they leave? I guess in the Afghanistan context, under the Taliban, many of the organizations, not think tanks, but NGOs, kept operating. So
almost all the
go
think
ahead.
tanks in Pakistan work in close connection with the military. I'm not sure. Is there any independent think tank? I mean, because there are national security, foreign policy think tanks, right? So they work in close partnership with the militaries, and which is fair. That's completely fine. I don't think they're going to be going anywhere.
All right, fair enough. I think this is a good point to depart. Thank you so much, Hussein. It was a pleasure having you,
My
and
pleasure.
inshallah, we'll get you again, and at a better time of your choosing.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye.
Take care, buddy. Bye bye. Khuda Hafiz ji.